I was sitting in my favorite establishment, waiting to meet a friend. It's just a small covered patio on the banks of Spa Creek in Annapolis, but in the summer, it can be the most interesting place on earth. The harbor is bustling with people coming ashore to eat dinner, water cabs shuttling them between Annapolis and Eastport, and the occasional drunken celebrant stepping off the sidewalk and tumbling into the harbor. There is no end to the entertainment, and you can get it all for just one mug of beer. My friend Dave called me that afternoon and asked me to meet him after work. That wasn't exactly like him. Dave is more of a stay-at-home in the evenings kind of guy, but so am I, so his call surprised me. Something told me this wasn't going to be a casual social evening with beer, nachos, and bad jokes. I saw him from a block away, and he didn't look good. Dave looked so sad, like his dog had died, he'd lost his job, and his wife had run away. Well, at least one of the three. He sat down at my table, and we stared at each other for a long time. "You want to talk about it?" He just sat there, staring at the water with his mouth slightly open and shaking his head slowly. You know, when a man shakes his head like that, he's not saying no, he's thinking, how could this have happened to me? He was silent for a long time, and then with a sigh, he said quietly, "She's cheating on me, Steve." Then he looked me in the eye and said, "I can't believe it. She's the last woman on earth that I thought was capable of such a thing." Just like that, I knew it was going to be bad, and I hoped it wasn't that bad, but I heard it in his voice on the phone earlier in the day and saw it in his walk along the harbor's edge. Either his wife was cheating on him, or the doctor had given him a death sentence. Frankly, I was glad it was the former. Dave is a good guy, and the world would be a smaller place without him. You know, you don't deserve this, Dave. That's not what you did. I've known you too long, and I know it's not your fault. There are rules in marriage, and no path that follows the rules leads to betrayal. The path may lead to unhappiness, it may lead to divorce, but there is no excuse for betrayal. Then why do I feel like such a failure? Well, I can tell you what I've learned about myself if it helps. We go through life with bravado and stupidity, thinking we're fine, enjoying life, and then we meet someone who teaches us how complete we are without them. We let them in, see ourselves through their eyes, and our worth is linked to their love for us. And then one day, they teach us that we are not who they always thought we were. We catch them lying to us, disrespecting us, breaking promises made to us, finding with someone else what we thought they could only find with us, and it all comes crashing down. My friend looked at me in amazement. "You went through that? You never told me. Who wants to talk about it?" If I had divorced Debbie, I would have told everyone and cursed her name, but it wasn't like that. I was lucky. She had a brief period of stupidity, of immaturity, and when her head cleared, she realized that marriage was paramount to her. It wasn't easy, but we gradually worked things out. I think it helped that she came clean, and I never caught her. If I had seen her do it, I don't think I would have been able to forgive her. We were before, and we are again now. It's not that we were unhappy with each other. Debbie had self-doubt, some misplaced sense of inadequacy, and that bastard played on her needs and weaknesses until she did something she swore she'd never do. And with that, I started telling him my story, a story I'd never told anyone because, in telling it, I was making it real, and I never wanted it to be real. Well, you know part of our story. We were high school sweethearts. We started dating back in high school and were inseparable from our first night. You know us. She wasn't a cheerleader, and I wasn't an athlete. We were nerds, but we were also honors students. I never liked the term nerd, but over the years, we both went to college where we excelled, found great jobs, advanced quickly, and established ourselves in the community. Sure, we were nerds in high school, but like many nerds, we've been very successful in our careers. There was one big difference between Debbie and me. Maybe it had to do with women's need to belong to society, to be included. I don't know. You see, being nerds, we had friends, but we were never categorized as the cool kids. I put up with the usual bullying from athletes like the rest of the regular students, but I just thought less of them because of it. There were girls who hung out with the athletes and enjoyed all the bullying and insults, but for some reason, I never considered them important or even part of my life. They were like the thistles and thorns I had to go through when I was walking in the woods. It was just a cost of moving forward. Debbie longed to be accepted by the crowd. She knew exactly what that was, but she saw the attention they received from many students and teachers. She just wanted to fit in with that crowd, and she knew she didn't. There were a few instances where one athlete or another paid her half-hearted signs of attention. I never liked the way she perked up when they did. I realized it was just entertainment for them, maybe a little conquest, but she would get brighter, and suddenly, I would cease to exist. She always came around, except when she was dating a soccer player and told me her family had plans of their own. I was estranged from her for 6 weeks after that. I was done with her. It took all of those 6 weeks for her to regain my favor, and I figured I'd gotten my way. There's one more thing about Debbie that you already know, although you would never hear me say it. She has flat breasts. I don't mean that she has small breasts or that they aren't twos, they're not even triplets or quadruplets. It's flat. My wife has breasts like a 14-year-old boy. Although, between you and me, I like them. I looked at him and, for a moment, regretted saying that. I felt like I had betrayed her. If you haven't realized yet, I don't care about any of this. I don't care if she was stacked like a marble statue. I love this woman, and all I've ever asked of those beautiful flat breasts is for them to be mine and mine alone, and for her to get aroused when I touch her. That's very important, you know. She can have breasts like a 14-year-old boy, but that doesn't mean she goes topless in the summer. It doesn't matter what she looks like, it matters what she is, and my wife is a woman with all the modesty she or any other woman needs. I love that woman. Like I said, over the years, we've progressed in our careers, built our lives as adults, and all that high school nonsense was left far behind in the rearview mirror. At least, that was the case for me, and I thought it was for Debbie too. I was wrong. All these years, through college and our careers, she carried a piece of that high school anger buried deep in her psyche. It was like a ticking bomb, and when pushed, it exploded. I took a minute to gather my thoughts. I came to the most painful part. We planned our lives. Nerds do that. We had a 5-year plan and a 10-year plan, and we were coming to the end of our 5-year plan. We were planning to start a family soon. Here's what every man needs to understand about women: at any time and for any reason, they can decide to have sex. And if they decide to, they will. It doesn't matter if she's married or single, pretty or not, stylish or busty. They wake up in the morning, put their feet on the floor, and if they say to themselves, "Today, I want to unwind a little bit. I think I'll have sex," they will, even though men brag about it. They don't have that kind of power. Men work for weeks or months to seduce a woman. The woman simply decides, and the man readily submits. If a married woman intends to be faithful to her husband and her vows, she must make that decision every day, because there is always a wolf lurking in the bushes, ready to lunge at an unsuspecting sheep. If she is having a bad day, if she feels unappreciated at home, if she has put on a few pounds or had a fight with her husband, it makes her even more vulnerable to his approach. He will become her friend, flatter her, tell her she is unappreciated, and work on that little chink in her armor until she starts to believe him. The wolf outside my door was named Peter. We knew him from high school, and you know the type. We've all met people like that. He went to school doing just enough to make ends meet. He played soccer and was a star on the team. He was the center of social life in school, the person to know, and when he graduated, he continued to act the same way based on his personality rather than any tangible talent. He graduated from college with mediocre grades in an uninteresting major. Eventually, Peter got a job as a salesman, but what else could he be? He began making regular visits to my wife's company, grooming the office manager, and establishing personal relationships with upper management. He was attentive to every opportunity and quickly noticed my wife. I'm only speculating, but it probably went something like this: Debbie Allen, is that you? She probably blushed and averted her gaze for a moment, then turned in his direction and said with a smile, Peter. He probably said something like, it's you. My God, you're even prettier than you were in high school. God, I hear his smarmy voice in my nightmares. Who knows what he was really thinking? The truth wasn't his weapon of choice. He would talk to her about her job, flatter her a little, and then with great reluctance, go to the meeting. He might even ask her to show him the way. Then, after the meeting, he would come back to finish the conversation, smiling the whole time, complimenting her, but not too much, and ending with something like, I hate to leave, but I have another appointment. I'll be back next Tuesday. Will you come? I'd like to finish our conversation. It's so good to see you again. Like I said, I wasn't there, but I'm sure it went something like this. He started off innocuously enough, trying not to cause any alarms that would make her feel uncomfortable. Seducing a married woman is a gradual matter. It's all about making her feel safe and loosening her inhibitions. True predators can recognize their prey at a glance. They recognize the weakest member of the herd and slaughter it as they've done hundreds of times before. He met her without making a big deal out of it. He flattered her and put himself in her position by asking for help. He thanked her for her kindness. The first invitation to dinner didn't come until a few weeks later. Of course, she was a married woman, so she declined, but he became a regular visitor to the office. She knew him. He was safe. He was polite. He appreciated her on good days. He kept her spirits up, and on bad days, he was the bright spot that lifted her spirits. He always needed some kind of help, and he always wanted to thank her. After all, it was rude of her not to let him take her out to dinner. It was all very innocent, at least that's how she described it to me in the end. Just sitting here and thinking about it, the anger was coming back to me. You put these things behind you, but you never truly forget. Betrayal of a loved one is painful and hard, but that same love can help you get through it. I never got over the fact that there was a predator in the world who thought nothing of me or my marriage. My wife was just another notch on his pole, and if her infidelity led to the destruction of my marriage, his accomplishment was even greater. He had turned me into nothing more than another humiliated husband whom he had bypassed and whom I had never forgiven. In the end, how and what he seduced her with was not that important. He was smooth and took his time. Everywhere he went, people seemed to know him. She felt at the center of the social world for the first time in her life, and she liked it. It satisfied a long-suppressed need in her heart. For a long time, he did nothing inappropriate. It was small steps, nothing to cause alarm, but gradually, she began to fail the faithful wife test. If she had ever asked herself, would I behave like this if Steve were here, she would have realized she was crossing the line. That was his talent. He could work with her in such a way that she never asked herself that question. He made his move when I was away on work for 1 week. She agreed to meet him for dinner. After all, it was all innocent and nothing to feel guilty about. She just forgot to tell me about it. She never talked about her dinner plans or the whole dinner thing. Dinner was delicious, so a little dancing couldn't hurt. After all, they were in public. What could have happened? She never told me how they made the deal, and frankly, I don't think I want to know, but she spent that night in his hotel room, and everything we built together came crashing down around us. To her credit, the guilt overcame her. I came home a few nights later and found her crying in the living room. She was in a terrible state. It took an hour to get a coherent sentence out of her. She kept repeating, I'm so sorry. I love you. I never meant to, and Peter, but nothing else I could understand. What she was trying to say, and who the hell was this Peter? When she was finally exhausted and crying out, she collapsed on top of me and clung to my chest like a drowning man in the waves. She continued to sob quietly and finally told me what she had done. Every married man knows that it can't happen. It happens to others. It happens to their friends, but it can never happen to them. They married well. Their wife is a rock. She's not some, she knows what she wants and will never cheat. It's not in her character. They are totally unprepared for it when it happens. They go into denial. They go into a rage. They become withdrawn. Eventually, they start looking for a way to get revenge. They want their wife to be hurt as much as they are because obviously, she isn't hurt enough after all. She's the one who cheated. They cry. They scream. They storm out of the house and rent a hotel room, vowing to find a lawyer. I've done it all. If a man has good friends and close family to bring them back into the world, and if he has a wife who is genuinely sorry for what they've done, they may eventually find their way home. Their self-confidence is shattered. Their trust in her has evaporated. They wonder how many times. They start all over again with the same woman who has already betrayed them. It's pure hell played out in a house that can't be big enough to hide from the pain for even one night. But love finds a way out if they are lucky and if they both try their best to make it happen. It took us a year. For the first 3 months, we slept in separate rooms. Then, for another month, we slept in the same bed without touching each other, whether out of modesty or shame. I never once saw her naked body during those first 4 months. She changed for bed in the bathroom and put on nightgowns. She stood at arm's length during the day and evening, asking if I needed anything, offering me snacks, and just waiting for me to forgive her. It was not a happy home. Over time, I realized that she needed forgiveness as desperately as I needed her forgiveness. I wanted my wife back. We both wanted our marriage back, the old marriage where we were comfortable and happy together. We saw a therapist. We talked. We fought. Well, I struggled. She mostly took the verbal blows until I was exhausted enough to fight on. One night, I was just sitting on the couch, thinking about how my life had turned to. She sat down next to me and gently laid her head on my shoulder for the first time in 4 months. I could smell her hair. It triggered a wave of memories and desire. I slowly moved to put my hand on her shoulder, but she jumped up, thinking I was pulling away. When she saw that I wasn't, she put her arm around me, and we spent the evening just sitting and not talking. When we went to bed, we cuddled again. There was still no sex. We were just together. It was the first intimacy we had felt in 4 long and agonizing months. Sex came later, but it came 6 months after healing. We were enjoying our time together again. We were both nervous and unsure of ourselves. The memories were still fresh, but we knew the door was open, and we were both walking through it together. We desperately wanted to be on the other side of the healing, but something was holding me back. There was unfinished business, and I knew this was the one time I wouldn't sit back and let the tough guy win. I hesitated for a while before finishing my story. What I'm about to tell you, you won't be able to tell any living soul. I'm not proud of it, but I'm not ashamed of it either. It's just that if you tell anyone, I could go to jail. Dave nodded, and I looked around to see if anyone was eavesdropping. I lowered my voice so that only Dave could hear. I knew when Peter was in town. My wife made sure I knew it was part of our no secrets policy. Well, it was either that or stake out her office, and I couldn't afford it. Telling me when Peter visited her office, what he talked to her about, and what he said was what I needed to rebuild my trust in her. She was honest about it. He was working on her, trying to replicate their night together. Despite that, I was relieved. She finally saw him for who he was, and I no longer feared he had power over her. She told me that every time he worked on her, she felt cheap, like she was just a piece of meat. That's when I realized I had my girl back. Peter was a creature of habit and was conventional in his pursuits. By that, I mean he preyed on women. If one woman was unavailable, he looked for another. He always stayed at the same hotel but hunted in several bars. Some nights he won, some nights he failed. Some parking lots were dimly lit. I could afford to be patient. Peter may have been fast and agile on the soccer field, but he couldn't dodge a metal pipe to save his life or his knees. As it turned out, to his credit, it was dark, and someone came up behind him before he realized it. Dave looked at his friend with renewed appreciation. "No, don't give me that look. I played poker all that night with 3 friends. I even lost $50 to each of them, exactly $150 to each of them. I was generous and paid it forward." I looked into my friend's eyes and saw that he understood. "Here's the thing. You can only heal a marriage with a spouse who wants to heal it with you, and you won't know if you have such a spouse until you confront them. Lay it out straight and find out if they still want what they lost in gambling. You're not Superman, and you're not perfect, so you need to forgive yourself for all the stupid things you've done and all the stupid things you're going to do before this is over. In the end, either she'll admit her wrongdoing and do the hard work with you, or you don't have as much to lose as you think you do. You won't know until you start." My friend looked as bad as when he first sat down at the table, but he was nodding. He understood. Good or bad, he knew what he had to do. One more thing. I looked around again to make sure we weren't being overheard. Revenge doesn't solve anything, but it does give back what was taken from you. So if you take my advice, don't get caught. First and foremost, work on your marriage. You have more questions than answers, at least as far as the important issues are concerned. Go after the answers and ask yourself what you want and what you won't settle for. Remember that neither of you can change the past. You can only live in the future. Find out what the future has to offer before you make any decisions. Will the pain ever stop? I looked at my friend. I can tell you that over time, the pain lessens, and it hurts less often. After a while, it's almost like a memory of the pain rather than the pain itself. At least, it feels that way to me now. But I have a wife who deeply regrets what she did. You need to find out what you have before you make any decisions. We spent the next hour sipping beer, and then we both headed home. I went home to my loving wife, my friend, and partner since my high school years, whom I had lost and now found. Dave went home to the unknown. No matter what he found there, he knew he had friends in his life he could turn to. He wasn't alone. That's all there was to it. Sometimes marriages fail, and sometimes they can be saved. Sometimes the cheating spouse deserves revenge, and sometimes they both deserve to feel whole again. It all depends on what they both want most and their willingness to trust again. #### David's story. How did my life fall apart so quickly? I got up this morning a happily married man, grateful for a loving and beautiful wife. At least, she is beautiful in my eyes. Tonight, I go home to the wife who betrayed me, and I don't know why or how often or even who he is. I've seen him, and I've seen them together, so I know she cheated on me, but that's all I know. Maybe I should explain. My name is David. When and where I met my wife, where we live, what I do for a living, none of that matters. I'm just a guy who loved his wife and now knows she's not the woman he thought she was. You're probably wondering how I got to this point. I got up this morning with the love of my life sleeping next to me. I took a quick shower, got dressed, and woke up my wife. It was a normal weekday morning. I usually grab a cup of yogurt and get to work about 45 minutes earlier than my wife, so I was out the door when she had already started her shower. I usually pack my lunch, and about once a week, I grab a snack of something close to the office. Today, I was going for a walk. I had a good morning at work, so no complaints so far. Around 11:20 a.m., I had a craving for chicken fried steak and chicken. I get that once every month or two. I know it's junk food, but when I get the urge, I go to Denny's and get a hash browns fried steak, sourdough bread, orange juice, and coffee for breakfast. In other words, I get breakfast for lunch. Today was supposed to be one of those days. It's a 20-minute drive, but I got to Denny's ahead of the lunch crowd and sat by the window. I was halfway through lunch and people watching, as I like to do when I'm alone, when I happened to glance across the street. That's when it happened. I saw my wife get out of the car, kiss a man I'd never seen before, and walk hand in hand into the motel room. Life doesn't prepare you for something like that. The first thing that happens is your mind shuts down. I just sat there staring, not believing what I was seeing. Then the mind goes into overdrive. It jumps from one idea to another. Did I really see that? Was it really my wife? Could she be cheating? Is there any other plausible reason for what I just saw? The next stage is denial. No, it can't be her. There's a good reason for it. I'm jumping to conclusions. I grabbed my phone and called her. She answered on the third ring. Hi, honey. Is everything okay? Yeah, I was just wondering where you were. That wasn't very subtle, was it? She hesitated, then answered, I'm at my desk as usual. We'll be working through lunch, and I'll probably be home late tonight. She lied to me, and she had never done that before. Really? I went into zombie mode, talking but not thinking, almost mumbling, sorry to hear that. Well, I guess I'll be going. And with those words, I hung up the phone. After thinking about it, she probably thought it was weird, but she didn't call me back. Now I wasn't sure of anything anymore, especially what I had seen with my own eyes. I sat there for a few more minutes, more in shock than anything else. It's funny how slow the mind works at times like this. It probably took me 5 minutes to get up off my ass and go see what was going on. A man who trusts his wife is slow to accuse and almost as slow to snoop. I tossed $20 on the table and walked out of the restaurant. In retrospect, I'm surprised I had the sense not to go out into the driveway, but I made it safely across the road and out into the motel parking lot. I checked the car, and it was her car. Then, after looking at the room, I headed toward it like I was approaching a sleeping lion. I knew that only death awaited me there. I walked over to the window, though, and like most motel rooms, the cheap curtains weren't fully closed. I peered inside into the gap between the curtains and saw that my marriage was dying. My mind exploded with images of revenge. I wanted to storm into the room and beat him to death. I wanted to drive her car through the door. I wanted to die. But here's the strange thing. Where shock and uncertainty shut down the brain, certainty led to a clarity of thought that I had rarely experienced. My pain briefly went away and was replaced by clear thinking. I needed proof. The woman in the room and the man she was with had become abstract things, and their actions were simply problems I needed to document. I took my cell phone and filmed them through the curtains. I took a picture of my wife's car next to his car with the door to their room clearly visible in the background. Then, calmly suppressing the pain and rage, I walked back to Denny's and ordered another cup of coffee. Only then, sitting by the window and watching the motel door, did the reality of her actions flood my consciousness, and the pain returned. I finally broke down, humiliated in front of a room full of strangers, and cried like a baby. The waitresses tried to comfort me. The cooks came out to see if they could help. Complete strangers held out their hands to me. I waved them away and told them that my wife was cheating on me and I had just found out. I don't think anyone had a nice lunch that day, but it's amazing how complete strangers reach out to share your pain while others completely ignore you. I sat there until they left, both leaving in the same direction. I wondered if maybe they worked together but traveled separately so as not to become an excuse for office gossip. I had strange moments of amazing clarity intertwined with rage and pain. I grabbed my phone, checked to see if I had video and pictures, and called my friend Steve. Eventually, I went back to my office and tried to work, but I was just killing time at the usual hour. I left and went to meet my friend over a few beers. He told me about the pain his wife's infidelity had caused him and how they had rebuilt their marriage. He told me that healing a marriage was possible but that we would both have to do the hard work together to do it and that I would never know it was possible until I confronted her. He was right. My mind was still spinning with thoughts of revenge, of lawyers, of wanting to send out the video to everyone I knew, including her family, but I knew I needed answers to the questions I was still trying to formulate. First, I drove home with conflicting thoughts. I wanted to strangle her, but I also wanted to beg her not to leave me. I had to show her proof but try to be patient and speak with love. I needed to resolve my conflicting desires before I got home, so a block away from our apartment, I stopped and tried to calm down and gather my thoughts. I made some simple decisions, knowing full well that I had no control over the confrontation. I could only know my own mind, and my mind said I would not be shared. I would no longer be lied to, and I would not be humiliated. The rest I could not control. With clear thoughts, I drove the last block to our house. She greeted me with her usual warm and loving hug and a kiss that almost made me throw up. "What's wrong, David? Did you have a bad day at work? Did something happen with Steve and Debbie?" "No, not with them. It was us. You know what I mean, Barb. Just the three of us." "The three of us? What are you talking about, silly?" "I'm not talking about a baby, Barb. I'm talking about you and your lover buddy. I saw you at the Starlight Motel today. I filmed you through the window." "I know, Barb. I know. I'd heard that a person's face can turn pale from shock, but I'd never seen it happen." She turned white, passed out, and collapsed to the floor at my feet. At that moment, I felt ashamed of myself. I knew I'd already let my temper get out of control, but now my wife lay unconscious on the floor at my feet, and I just stood there looking at her. I was still her husband, and I had to start acting accordingly. I knelt down, lifted her into my arms, and gently laid her down on the couch. A cool damp washcloth was applied to her forehead, and soon she came to her senses. She was defeated, sitting quietly on the couch and staring at the floor. "How did you know? Does it matter?" "I guess not. We thought we were being so careful. Cheaters always get caught in the end." It was a lie, and I knew it. A lot of cheaters get away with it, but that knowledge brought me no comfort. "Who is he?" "I won't tell you." I knew it was a bad sign. We weren't going to get out of this situation in one piece if she kept secrets and controlled the flow of information. I pulled out my phone and started playing the video I had made earlier that day. "Tell me who he is, or we have no future." She was broken and looked at me with pitying eyes. "Do we have a future now? I cheated on you. No one forgives that." I knew she was wrong about no one, but she could very well be right about us. I tried to get my emotions under control. I held back and began to speak patiently and calmly. "I went out with Steve today. He and Debbie went through this a year ago. We can fix this. We can rebuild our marriage." That made her cry even harder. She didn't deny anything, and I prepared to ask the big question. "Do you want us to get back together?" She shrugged. Did that mean she didn't know or that she didn't want to talk? I just sat there and watched her. Over time, we sat side by side, not talking, not looking at each other, just sitting there. Finally, I decided to repeat the question. "Do you want to reconnect us, Barb?" She just exploded into screams and tears, jumped up from the couch, ran to our bedroom, and slammed the door shut. I saw no reason to follow her. I just sat there, wallowing in self-pity. Half an hour later, she came out, dragging her suitcase behind her. She walked to the door without saying a word, then turned, looked at me, and walked silently out of our apartment. I guess I had my answer. The next week was nothing short of hell. I went to the office and tried to bury my thoughts in work, but I wasn't very successful. I told my boss about my situation and told my coworkers I wasn't trying to hide anything. Some might say that I should be somehow ashamed that my wife had turned to another man, but I kept my vow. I didn't hide the betrayal. Dinner turned into hamburger at the cafe, and my evenings were beer and TV, which I pretty much ignored. I wondered why she'd left so quickly. Was it always part of her plan? Was she so ashamed that she had to run? Did she love him? Had she ever loved me? These are the kinds of things betrayal does to a person. My salvation came a week after my confrontation with Barb. By then, I had already gone to a lawyer and started the paperwork. I knew she was living with the jerk, and I didn't need to know more. David was right. You can't repair a marriage on your own. I sat in my apartment and pondered infidelity. It's so strange, isn't it? You spend years with a person, building a life together, taking care of each other, treating their illnesses, and rejoicing in their successes, and then she lets some sleep with her, and everything falls apart. It's such a small thing compared to a life together, and yet that's all it is. That's when I finally realized it wasn't just about sex. It wasn't about wanting to experience another man. It wasn't even about pleasure. There comes a point in every sexual act and a man wants to make his partner his for her part. She accepts him, and at this last moment, longs for his child. Lying and deception are bad enough, but the real act of betrayal is the moment when the animal self takes over, longing for oneness with that other person. This feeling may pass and often has to be denied later, but it is at the heart of every act of infidelity. How can a husband put up with it if her desire is for someone else? I was feeling sorry for myself as usual when the doorbell rang. I hoped and feared it was Barb, anxiously walking to the door and opening it. The sight that greeted me brought a smile to my face for the first time in a week. Denise. What are you doing here? Denise and I have been friends since high school. She's a red-headed beauty with fiery eyes. She had her moments of sudden anger or unbridled humor, but no matter what, she always remained my loyal friend. I considered asking her out a few times when I was single, but either she was infatuated, or I was seeing someone else. She came to our wedding and knew my wife well. She's always been a bright spot in my life. Is that any way to greet a girl? I've come all this way. Her reprimand was exaggerated. She smiled her warm smile, and all her barbs spoke of her good mood. Come in, please. I'd like to see a friendly face for just a few minutes. We sat down on the couch, and before I could say anything sensible, she said, I heard about Barb. I'm really sorry about that. If it's any consolation, I think she's an idiot. Actually, it helps a lot. I can't tell you the self-doubt I've been having. I go to work and just do my duties, and then I sit here and feel sorry for myself. She held my hand and rested her head on my shoulder. We sat like that for about an hour, talking and occasionally laughing, reminiscing about the past, and discussing possible futures. The evening seemed to pass quickly, and my mood was elevated. Finally, Denise stood up and said, Do you mind if I use your bathroom? Of course not. You know where it is. No. With those words, she headed to the back of the apartment, past the bathroom in the hallway, and entered my bedroom. I was too slow to notice it. After a few minutes, she called out, Will you help me with this? Men can be so stupid sometimes. I walked back into the bedroom, rounded the corner, and there she stood in one of my shirts and nothing else. I froze with my mouth open. When a married man meets a nearly naked woman, his first thought is, I must have done something wrong. She laughed. Is that any way to greet a girl? She slowly walked over to me, put her arms around my neck, and kissed me in a way that made my heart beat again. As we kissed, I inhaled her scent, felt the shape of her body under her shirt, felt her squirm slightly as she pressed herself against me. She laughed again, but there was something much more than humor in her voice. Denise, I know I'm depressed, but you don't have to do this for me. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for me. I've wanted you for a very long time, and I was heartbroken when that clawed her claws into you. I'm not going to stand by and let some other claim you now. I'm claiming you this time. She laughed when she said that. If you want me to leave in the morning, I will. Today, I just want to interview for the position of faithful girlfriend. What can I say? Is there a man in the world who can say no in this situation? If there is, tell him to seek help from a psychiatrist. I knew my answer and spent the rest of the night proving it to her. In the morning, I made her breakfast, and as we left the apartment, I had the biggest, silliest grin on my face. I wasn't healed, but I was happy. From that night on, we became practically inseparable. My divorce went through without too much trouble, and Denise moved in with us 4 months after that first night. The move was really just a formality. It meant she rented out her apartment. She never took anything for granted, but about 2 weeks after our first night together, she asked if she could leave a few things at my house. I happily agreed. Every time she brought a few more things, she asked ahead of time, and I agreed, of course. I knew what she was doing, and I was glad she did. Barb took some of our furniture, making room for Denise's stuff. I preferred it that way and asked Barb to take more of it. I think it hurt her feelings, but I wasn't going to hurt her intentionally. The pain of Barb's betrayal was still there, but Denise was healing me, dealing with my moods and self-doubt. Now I had a new life to build, and I was building it with Denise. It took me a long time to get over Barb's betrayal. I tried to build a relationship with Denise as something separate from my failed marriage to Barb, but you carry your past with you into every new endeavor. The turning point came at Denise's company Christmas party. We attended, and I was on my best behavior. I wanted to make the best impression on her coworkers. I met her friends, danced with a few of them, and had a beer with their husbands. There was one guy who kept asking her out on the dance floor. His name was Frank. It seemed like every time she came back from the dance floor and sat down at our table again, Frank was there. She and I would dance together, and he would ask to cut in. It was getting really annoying, and I started to think I could see a slight smirk on his face when he did this. In the middle of the party, I was having a beer with a few husbands. I turned in her direction just in time to see Frank run his hand over her ass. Then, before I could do anything, a loud schmuck came out. The sound echoed around the room. She broke free from his grasp and slapped him so hard that the whole room froze. The music stopped, then my loving and not-so-shy girlfriend said in a loud voice for all to hear, "No, I will not sneak around with you, and if you ever put your hand on my ass again, I will." I saw the flash in her eyes, and before I could move to save his worthless balls, she took a step toward him and hit him with all her might with her right knee. Frank screamed and collapsed to the floor, grabbing for his jewelry. Denise turned away from him, walked over to me, and said, "It's time to leave." To say our leaving didn't go unnoticed would be an understatement. We paid our respects to her boss and apologized. He asked to speak to us outside. I was ready for a reprimand when he said, "I saw what happened, and I'm sorry. Frank is in, and I think his days here are numbered. I wouldn't want to fire him right here and now, but I'm going to tell him that his future here is not bright. I'm going to advise him to find another job, and I'm sure he'll be gone soon. If you have any other problems with him, feel free to contact me directly." I liked the guy, liked the coworkers I met with the exception of Frank, and felt very good about my relationship with Denise. I think it was that night that all my doubts disappeared, and I realized that this woman was a real wife. We were married about a year and a half later. We took our time, turned our friendship into love, and built our marriage on trust and honesty. #epilogue. I never found out the reason for Barb's infidelity. When she left, I had a strong feeling that she felt the impossibility of forgiveness and chose the only path available to her. She moved in with this jerk, but that didn't last long. Men who hang around with married women are not fit to be husbands. Denise healed me, and now I'm happy. I wish Barb well and hope she finds what she's looking for. It's been 5 years. Denise and I are married. We have a daughter and a son on the way. She still works for the same company and is advancing in her career. We invite her boss and his wife to parties when we get together with friends and neighbors. Steve and Debbie always participate in these gatherings as well. It makes me happy to see that they have made it together. Oh yes, we bought the house 2 years ago. It's just a starter home, but it suits us just fine. Life is good. I have a wife that I love and trust completely. She has given me 2 children and is threatening more. I know she would never betray me, and I know her character, so I just agree with everything she says, try to wipe that stupid grin off my face, and do what I'm told.